Hello, I'm Ashley Hefner, Advanced Planning Manager for the City of Culver City. Culver City is in the process of updating its general plan, which will help guide how our city government makes decisions and serves residents over the next 25 years. The general plan covers topics we all care deeply about, including housing, the economy, climate adaptation and resiliency, health and equity, transportation, arts and culture, parks and recreation, urban design, and so much more. I'm pleased to introduce a new video series where our team of expert consultants will share key findings from their research on existing conditions in Culver City. The city will use their insights and feedback from the community to shape policies in the updated general plan. A mini survey accompanies each video for you to share your thoughts on the content presented in the videos. We need to hear from you to create a general plan for Culver City that's driven by our community values. So please share the videos and surveys with others. This is a challenging time, and we thank you for your continued interest in the general plan update. Community engagement related to the general plan update will continue. For the time being, it will transition to an online format through methods such as these informational videos and surveys to gather input. Thank you, and please enjoy the video.
Hello, and welcome to this presentation on greenhouse gas emissions in Culver City. My name is Tim Whitwer, and I'm a climate change specialist from Environmental Science Associates. I'm part of the larger consulting team hired by the city to help with the general plan update. I'll be discussing greenhouse gases, or GHGs, and what causes them, and identifying the main emission sources from both municipal operations and citywide activity in Culver City. GHGs are gases that absorb energy from the sun and trap that energy as heat in the Earth's atmosphere, creating the greenhouse effect. GHGs come in a variety of forms, both naturally occurring and human caused. Here's a list of the most common GHGs in our atmosphere. And not many people realize that water vapor is considered a GHG, but the difference between water vapor and other GHGs, such as carbon dioxide and methane, is that it persists in the atmosphere for much less time. Water vapor will stay in the atmosphere on the timescale of days, whereas other GHGs can persist for years or even decades and are the greatest contributors to climate change. Part of understanding GHGs and climate change involves differentiating these naturally occurring historical GHG emissions from more recent human-caused GHG emissions. Human-caused GHGs mainly come from industrial processes and human activities that require combustion of fossil fuels. Some examples include electricity generation, gas or diesel-powered vehicles, and air travel. As you can see in this graph, GHG emissions fluctuate over time, but their range in atmospheric concentration levels, measured in parts per million, stayed within 175 to 300 parts per million from 800,000 BCE up until the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. At the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, human-caused GHG emissions significantly increased with the introduction of coal-burning power plants and factories and the invention of the automobile. Since this time, atmospheric levels of GHGs have surpassed 400 parts per million worldwide and rapidly rising, way higher than the historical range. So atmospheric levels of GHGs have increased substantially over the last 150 to 200 years, but why should we care? The steep increase in GHGs has trapped more heat in our atmosphere, resulting in abnormal and extreme weather events that are increasingly unpredictable. The warming is contributing to more hurricanes, melting glaciers and ice sheets, flooding, wildfires, periods of intense heat and drought, and collapse of important ecosystems. The general consensus among climate scientists is that to prevent irreversible effects of climate change, we must limit global temperatures to a maximum of 2 degrees Celsius. That's a 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels. While that doesn't seem like much of a difference, on a global scale, a 3.6 degree Fahrenheit increase can throw the Earth's equilibrium out of balance. So how will climate change affect Culver City? While climate change is a global issue, there are localized impacts for Culver City and the surrounding area. Climate change can lead to intense heat waves, especially in highly urbanized areas such as the city, And it could also lead to sea level rise that inundates neighboring communities such as Venice, Marina del Rey, and Santa Monica. Also, as we've seen in recent years, the devastating effect of wildfires in the region, which is due in part to drier conditions and higher temperatures. These conditions also reduce agricultural productivity, which can lead to food security issues. And all of these impacts have implications on public health. California has committed to reducing GHG emissions through Assembly Bill 32 and Senate Bill 32, or AB 32 and SB 32, which together require statewide reductions of 40% below 1990 GHG levels by 2030 and 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. For the state to hit these ambitious goals, cities and communities like Culver City will have to do their part to track their GHG emissions and reduce them. And this figure here shows California's emissions since 1990 and indicates the statewide reductions needed to meet its future targets. Culver City has taken the first step in reducing its emissions by creating a GHG emissions inventory for baseline year 2019 for both its municipal operations and for its citywide activity. These inventories will be helpful in tracking emission sources, creating a baseline, and identifying any reductions needed to meet state targets. Here's a breakdown of the municipal operations GHG emission inventory for Culver City, which includes emissions from city-owned buildings, vehicle fleet, water usage, street lighting, and more. The majority of municipal emissions comes from buses for public transportation, which use 100% renewable natural gas, employee vehicles used for city services such as the police force and parks and recreation, and employee personal vehicles for commuting to work. Mobile emissions are typically the largest contributor to a municipal operations GHG inventory. And here's a summary of the community or citywide emissions inventory, which includes emissions from all residential and commercial electricity and natural gas usage, transportation, solid waste disposal, and other sectors listed here. Similar to the municipal inventory, on-road vehicles account for the majority of GHG emissions, with natural gas and electricity used by buildings being the second and third biggest contributors. Culver City's electricity emissions are relatively low as compared to emissions from other jurisdictions, and I'll discuss that further on the next slide. The reason Culver City has relatively low electricity emissions is due to the fact that the city is enrolled in Clean Power Alliances, or CPA's, utility services. CPA provides electricity with a larger share of renewable energy sources than the electricity provided by a typical large-scale utility like Southern California Edison or PG&E. Since May 2019, Culver City's municipal operations have been using 100% renewable electricity, which results in zero emissions from electricity use. Similarly, all city businesses and residents are enrolled in CPA's 100% renewable option unless they opt for a lower renewable percentage option or opt to use Southern California Edison instead. With over 95% of the city now using 100% renewable power, the resultant GHG emissions are much lower than we see in other cities that are served by utilities providing a much smaller percentage of renewable power. Also, as noted before, on-road transportation makes up the majority of municipal and citywide emissions. Both transportation and natural gas sectors have a high potential for emissions reductions through alternative forms of transit, be it electric vehicles or public transit, and by replacing natural gas equipment with electric equipment. Reducing citywide GHG emissions requires effort from both the local government and from the individuals that live there. Some things you can do to help reduce emissions include staying enrolled in CPA's 100% green option and walking, biking, or taking public transit, especially if you're traveling a short distance from home. Other ways include installing energy efficient lighting, HVAC and appliances, and conserving electricity and water. You could also reuse or repurpose household items and prevent unnecessary waste by using reusable shopping bags or using glass jars for food storage. Things that seem really small can add up, especially if a community is dedicated to sustainability. Lastly, investing in an electric vehicle will help reduce on-road emissions and likely cost less over its lifetime than a traditional combustion engine vehicle. I know climate change can seem daunting and uncontrollable, but Culver City is committed to fighting it. With that being said, we'd love to hear from you on your ideas for reducing emissions and creating a green, sustainable Culver City. Thanks for listening to this presentation. If you have any questions or comments about GHG emissions or the city's GHG municipal or citywide inventories, please contact the planning department at advance.planning@culvercity.org. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the City of Culver City's General Plan Update video series. For more information about the General Plan Update and opportunities to get involved, visit pictureculvercity.com. Thank you, and stay safe.